So, how do I resist temptation? Hopefully, this video will offer a few insights. Maybe it'll be helpful for you. In 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, there is no temptation that has taken you, but such as common to man. Is that whenever a temptation comes along for you to sin, a lot of people presently are struggling with the same thing, and generations before you have been on that same path. It does say that God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted above or beyond what you're able. So the temptation has been monitored. You can resist it. It also says in 1 Corinthians 10:13 that God will provide, with the temptation, God will provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. It may not just vanish away immediately, but there'll be an open door somewhere that you can make it out of that situation or endure it without sinning in the process. It's an encouraging verse. But let's talk about a few things as well that might be helpful for you. Let's learn a lesson from Adam and Eve in the garden. When it comes to temptation, often the devil tries to get you to focus upon the one thing that you don't have in your life right now. And he wants you to ignore everything that you do have. Eve and Adam became focused upon one piece of fruit. The text says, though, that God told them they could eat from any tree of the garden, and actually they could eat as much as they wanted. They had an ideal relationship. There was no sin or suffering in the world. They were in paradise. They were in a perfect world, and the devil was able to convince them that on a certain level they were deprived. I typically find he operates the same way with us. He tries to get me or you to focus upon maybe the one thing that we don't have right now, and to lose sight of the 1,000 good things that we do. And he wants us to sacrifice those 1,000 things for that one temporary thing. And so that would be the first thing. Don't get sidetracked. Don't get tunnel vision. Don't focus on the one thing you don't have right now. Count your blessings. Realize all the good things that you do have in your life. Particularly, I see that happen when it comes to affairs. I find men and women who have, they might not have perfect marriages, but they have pretty good marriages. They have kids. They have a pretty comfortable life. They have a family, a lot of good things in their life, and they throw that all away for just a little momentary moment of pleasure that doesn't last that long. Remember, that last comment is that whatever the devil offers us is temporary. It doesn't last very long. And it is a very poor substitute for the real thing. The devil can't create anything. That's at least one observation I have, is that the devil has to make use of what has already been made. He's not original in that sense, not creative in that sense. So a good example of that would be pornography is a very poor substitute for sexual relations with an actual living, breathing human being. It's a very poor substitute or knockoff. And most of the temptations that the devil offers are in that category. They're kind of this generic brand sort of thing. They're not the real thing, but they're kind of a knockoff of the real thing, but a very poor quality substitute. So remember that when you opt for a temptation over the real deal, you are offering for a poor quality substitute. That's, at least I think a lot of people would reinforce that just by life experience. Yielding to temptation does not offer any personal growth. It doesn't offer any personal improvement. It's never going to make you a better person. You're not going to gain any more knowledge or wisdom in the process. If you feel bad right now, you might say, I don't know if I can stand it. I just have to yield. You're going to feel worse later. Remember that. And not only that, but at least remember if you do yield, what it's like. Be honest. Be honest with temptation. Be honest about that it has never delivered what it has promised. I try to remember that at times in the grocery store. At times in the grocery store, I might see a product that looks pretty good. I've tried it before. It wasn't that great, but somehow I'm going, well, I'll buy it this time and maybe it will taste better. No, it's still not that great. Temptation is like that. And sometimes one of the helps of temptation is simply be honest with it. Is that every time every time that temptation has surfaced, here's what it's promised. I mean, it's promised big. It's promised me the moon, and it's never delivered. It's been short-lived. There's a statement in Hebrews 11 that talks about that Moses chose suffering with the people of God rather than the passing pleasures of sin. The idea that whatever pleasure temptation offers is a very short-lived pleasure. The pleasures that God offers are long-term pleasures. Maybe keep that in mind. God is not against you having fun. There's a lot of passages in the Bible that would make the point that when God says no, it's not because he's afraid that you're going to have fun or be a free spirit or something. When God says no, it's for good reason, is that temptation doesn't offer you a free spirit. It offers you bondage. Jesus was clear in John chapter 8. Everyone that commits sin is a slave of sin. It's not everyone that commits sin finds life, or everyone that commits sin is a free spirit. I don't know, maybe we've watched too many Hollywood movies or read too many books where the idea is that the person that's abiding by biblical morality is repressed and they're a slave and they don't find any joy. And the person that just goes out and breaks the rules, they're this free spirit. And I don't know about you, that may work in a movie, but trouble is movies and books like that are not real life. In real life, I find that people that do not abide by the morality in the Bible are not free. They're slaves. They're in bondage. And that was true in my life as well. Yeah, I was out there doing what I wanted to do. Was I happy? No. Was I free? No. Did I have quality relationships? No. And did the pleasure last? Hardly. All right. Have long-range thinking. Where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years or 20 years? If you keep yielding to this temptation, where will that take you? Particularly as a man. As a man, do you want to end up being 60 or 70 years old and still oogling younger women? You want to be a 70-year-old guy addicted to pornography? You want to be a 70-year-old creepy guy. Is that the guy you want to become? At 60 years old, do you want to look back upon one failed relationship after another failed relationship? Is that what you want for your future? When you're 70, do you want to be still sitting on a bar stool telling the same stories you told at 20 and never have grown at all or learned anything new or have anything new to say or have developed the wisdom? I mean, what do you want in 5 years? What do you want in 10 years from now? What will you have wished you would have done? Other thing on temptation. Too many people make the argument, my desires are too strong. And particularly men often will talk about their sexual desires being too strong. Well, they're just, here I am, this virile man, whatever, and they're just too strong to resist. Actually, that's not true. Here's the problem. It's not that your desires are too strong, it's your desires are too weak. That is, there are desires in you. You're made in God's image. There are desires in you that should be for things like virtue and goodness and having long-term relationships and building a good foundation and etc. And loving your Creator and serving Him and doing the right thing and having courage to do that. If you're yielding to temptation, the problem is not that you're filled with overpowering desires. And this is the hard thing to swallow. If you're a man or a woman and you're yielding to sexual sin, it's not that you have these strong desires. It's you're weak. Your desires are way too weak. What about the desires for virtue? What about the desires for moral courage? What about the desires to do the right thing? What about the desire, I don't want to use people? Okay, because if you're involved in sexual sin, you're being used and you're using somebody else because it's not love. It's all about infatuation and it's all about lust. And the only person you care about is you. That's weak. And so develop the desires in you that need to be strong. Develop those desires. And that's why the Bible is not simply a book of don't do this and don't do that. Yeah, there are things that the Bible say, get this out of your life. But typically in the same passage that you're told to get something out of your life, like anger, envy, jealousy, etc., it will tell you to put the positive in its place. So, how do you feel after yield? Always remember that. Sometimes we forget. We forget what we need to remember. We need to remember every time I yield to that temptation, I feel horrible. I'm ridden with guilt and shame. Psalm 32, 3-4 is David's confession of what happened when he did not own up to his sin. He had no energy. He was depressed. So keep that in mind. Not only that, but remember this with temptation. If you yield, you're going to need an increasing level to kind of reach the same satisfaction, momentary satisfaction, that the last yielding gave you. That's why it's called addiction. That's why it's been observed by many people. You start getting alcohol and drugs, and you need an increasing level of that to kind of give you the same high, and so you get in that cycle of addiction. And sexual sin is like that too. Pornography, you need increasing levels of more depraved or more violent forms just to kind of give you the same level of satisfaction. Materialism is that way too. You just need to buy bigger and better things, or that amount of money in the bank no longer makes you happy. You have to have more than that. So just kind of keep that in mind when you open the door and go down the path to temptation. Satisfaction and fulfillment and contentment are not found there. It's actually the opposite. You're less satisfied, you're more discontent, and you're going to end up angry too, because you're going to end up angry that you bought all of this hook, line, and sinker. You bought the lie, this is going to make you happy. And beware, when you focus on what's going to make you happy, that is, you're convinced that that car, motorcycle, house, whatever, or that woman or man, they're going to make you happy. And guess what? When they don't, when you find out they have feet of clay, when you find out that those possessions cannot make you happy, beware, you're going to resent them. So just heads up, you leave your husband for another man. You leave your wife for another woman, okay? Convinced that's happiness. You get in that relationship and you find out you're the same person, right? You haven't changed. You still got all your flaws. And you find out that the relationship with them is pretty much like the relationship with your former mate. And do not be surprised if you start resenting that person and resenting that relationship and getting angry because it was sold as going to make me happy. And you realize that you were lied to and you accepted the lie. So just don't be surprised that if you go down the path of sin, you'll end up disgusted with not only your sin, but yourself. So be careful about creating a monster. You go down the path of temptation, you're creating a monster that has an insatiable appetite. No matter how much you feed it, it's always hungry. In contrast, the Bible presents a path that if you go down that path, contentment, satisfaction, real lasting happiness, joy, deep joy, in whatever situation you are, that you will run into that. Okay. So care what happens about you in eternity. Acts 2:40, save yourselves. God doesn't want to see anyone end up lost. Ezekiel 18:32. Talk to your future self. Have a conversation with them. Every choice we make are creating our future. Our good choices are adding more opportunities in our future. Every good choice you make is opening a door for you. Every temptation you yield to is closing a possible door in the future for you. Our sinful choices remove future opportunities, future blessings, and future happiness. Don't just wait and see what happens. Well, I'll just kind of wait and see what happens. Nothing good ever happens when you just wait and see what happens. Do not believe the lie, it won't happen to me. There's a lot of people out there that have said, I know, I've seen people leave their mates, I've seen people get in an affair, and it's been an absolute disaster, and they haven't been happy in that relationship either. I've seen someone divorce their really good mate, get involved with somebody else, claim that that person made them happy, claim that they could not live without them, claim that they've been happier than they've ever been happy before in their life, and a couple years later, that relationship is over. All right? But sometimes you try to say what happened to them, but it won't happen to me. No, sin and temptation, they're predictable for all of us. We're not different than other people. We have a lot more in common with everybody. The same things appeal to us that appeal to other people. It's the same common temptations. It's the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. It's the same thing. And Satan is not tempting you because he likes you. He hates you. He wants to destroy you. And God offers something far more real and far more better than anything that Satan can offer. And how about this? How about just the realization that happiness is never found on the path of selfishness? Can we just be honest and own up to that? How could it be? That would be an oxymoron, right? How could happiness ever be on the path of doing your own thing? On the path of put yourself first? Obviously, that never works. It's never worked for anybody else. Why do I think it's going to work for me? Do you really want to fix your life? Sin's not going to fix it. Sin gums up the best laid plans. Sin gums up the most talented people. Sin gums up the most ideal circumstances. But righteousness, virtue, godliness can take a mess and turn it into something that is now useful to God. Don't ever buy into the idea, I'm too old to change. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you're not a dog, okay? You can change. You can change. The Bible is filled with people that were in up to their necks in sin. The people in Ephesians 1 through 3, were in sin so long that the Bible said they're children of, that by nature they're children of wrath, that their lifestyle had become so usual and ordinary and typical and etc., that now they had acquired the nature of children of wrath. And yet by the time you reach the end of that chapter, they're now part of God's household and fellow citizens with the saints. The Corinthians were in the deep addictive sins, and yet Paul would say, and such were some of you. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 11. At the end of the day, who are you going to believe? God says you can change. You're made in my image. You're a spirit in a body. There's a lot more spiritual about you than physical. Yeah, you can live a godly life. You can change. You can be virtuous and courageous. You can be patient and kind. You don't have to just yield to short-term momentary pleasure. You can be a wise, noble, godly person. Well, the devil says you can't. So, which one are you going to believe? Because you will believe one of them. My name is Mark. Until next time, we'll see you later.